Hi everyone, it's Eileen Burns from Stress Coach Training. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about why is TV and media, why can TV and media be so stressful or so stimulating on what we call the nervous system? Why can or a lot of media actually be unhealthy, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically? So, first of all, if we look at TV, television, in many ways, television is just a box with imagery and it's telling a story. Okay, now that story can be truth, it can be fact, fiction, it can be a little bit of both. But the reality is that many of the things that have been designed on television, like adverts, particularly, even a lot of films and stories, when people are producing these type of things, there can be they're using a huge psychological component in these stories, even in the music that they use, the imagery they use, the characters that they use, the way that they take certain angles of the story to get us to believe a certain thing, a certain belief system, or to see things from the angle that that storyteller would like us to see. So you've got that on one hand, right? Now, some people look at the word television as tell a lie vision, tell or just tell vision, right? Now, when we go way back when television really started to come out and it started to hit and be used, for example, for commercial use to sell products and promote products, there was, in many ways, an unhealthy degree of a psychological agenda in relation to persuade people to buy. And that is when they started to use sexual images or materialism like seduction, ways that they knew they could hook into this, what we call the psyche, triggering people's emotions and their desires, right? And maybe either fears or unworthiness. So if we look at the beauty industry, for example, anything that is based on making or trying to be sold as something that makes you feel more beautiful, more sexy, more worthy, is all based on your individual lack, any aspects of within you that where you feel there is a lack, right? Where there is not enough, or where you feel there may be flaws. And that they flaws don't have to be real, but it's about how vulnerable we are as a human and how easily we get engrossed in this story, right? That we can easily be triggered into buying and spending things on something we believe on an unconscious, not a conscious level, but an unconscious level. We're actually buying that product or service because we believe certain things about what it says. Now, through the years, that I suppose the advertising industry has got a bit even more crazy, and some of it we do sometimes even how could you say more um more unaware of us even notices that some things are just too pushy, too risky, and too insane. But the reality, if we like it or not, is most media and marketing is based on this agenda. They use imageries every day, even news, right? News uses angles. They use a certain agenda, a story. We see in all aspects of society how media, even celebrities, why does certain celebrities manage to persuade people to buy certain things? Because it's all to do with influence and its psychology, and certain celebrities will often be in a way you could call it, groomed to present themselves as a certain way, or they get associated with certain characters in films so people feel familiar. Now, I use and talk a lot about archetypes in my spiritual marketing and in work when I'm working with businesses and even helping people like coaches, healers, and therapists with their business. Because the reality is we all actually have different aspects of archetypes within our own persona in some ways. We tend to take on certain roles, right? And we have the most obvious, the kind of fatherly archetype, the motherly archetype. And the motherly archetype tends to be the nurturer, the caregiver, okay, the supporter of the family, but also maybe the one that stands and tries to do, maybe knows that they have to be firm sometimes. Now we've got the father and the archetype and the role that the father archetype plays as well, the fatherly role. And these archetypes, even though we call them, they're in the spiritual collective, and even though through the years, that if we look at even the feminine and masculine, why is how we look at men very different now than maybe 30, 40 years ago? In many ways, it's to do with how the media has tried to change how we believe things should be and shouldn't be. They have a lot of power. And if we look at wars and governments and politics, they all use these agenda to feed their perspective or their end of the story to their audience. So no matter what country that you're in and you belong to, when there's a war, they will present the agenda. And we're seeing this more and more where journalism now is only having one side of a story. It is not going and looking at a wider perspective. So you've got all that. We've got all what we call, this is programming. This is programming certain beliefs and thoughts and programming us all to have a certain view. And we've seen this for years in certain types of countries. And I'm not going to say too much because even what I'm saying could have me banned. But we've seen, particularly people that use social media, and particularly if you're a business, we're seeing more and more how censorship is so high. Only certain agendas are being, how could you say, projected. So you've got all that going on. And you've got that. And what happens when people are tired and they come in from work, for example, and they stick on the television? One of the ways that the media can really reach people's unconscious without even being aware is when people are tired. Because often when people are tired, they're just sitting back and they're being very passive. They're not conscious of what they're watching. So they actually might be watching something that they know is completely not true or is quite disturbing. But actually, if you're so tired and you're just sitting there and you've got the television on, the reality is you're subliminally taking in a lot more information than you think you are taking in on a conscious level. And it's the same as social media. We can be scrolling through, but a lot of people just scroll through, just keep looking on Facebook, keep checking this out of habit, out of addiction. And what they're doing is they're picking up of lots and lots of information. And that information often is somewhere in your unconscious. Now, sometimes we do have certain kind of what we call bottlenecks. What happens? It takes some of that information and it only takes the information that it feels it correlates, right? But no matter what it does, the information that we consume on a daily basis is not healthy. And I don't mean just from the information that we're getting fed, but how much. If you take it, if we take back 100 years ago, the most people spent most of the day either, out working or out in the fresh air, out doing certain activities. They were not holding their phone and scrolling their phone. They weren't sitting for hours in front of a television. They weren't checking the news at a certain time all the time. They may have listened to the radio and things like that. But we go way back, and you go further back than that, you can understand people had a more clearer mind. calm mind, a more peaceful mind that was not injected or programmed with lots of information, lots of other people's opinions, right? Now, one of the things that I've found really interesting over the last few years, particularly, and is how I started to realize that most people were not using their intuition, their gut, and were not using any aspect of their sixth sense. They were allowing themselves to be programmed and not having the ability to critically think. And that can happen for lots of reasons. It can be, again, this exhaustion, tiredness, stress, and even general stress from overstimulation, which cause people to, in some level, shut off, right? But still, they're still taking information and they don't realize because they're still listening to something, even though there's some aspect of them so tired they're not really fully conscious of what they're listening to. They're bringing it in. Also, because in a way, most people are suffering from overstimulation. So they are not getting proper sleep. They are not having the ability to have a quiet mind, a calm mind, which when you've a more calm and still mind, you can be more discerning. And you can tell your body, you physically, the way the intuition and the soul works and our senses work, we pick up something's not quite right or something doesn't feel true, right? Or something doesn't add up. But when people are stressed, exhausted, overstimulated, they're functioning at a very primal level and they're just, in many ways, the brain kind of scans for fear all the time. And when it scans for fear as much as that, it can believe lots of things that are not reality. And it can also believe it's almost like when you're in a state of fear and someone says, no, this is the way you go, you do this. And they're the leader. And because they're being confident and firm when you are stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, or whatever, that leader is guiding you forward. Media is very stimulating. When people do not, when they spend most of the day with a busy mind, with an active mind, and a distracted mind, they in many ways cut themselves off from their own soul, from their own intuition, and from their own spiritual discernment. They are cutting themselves off from their inner guidance. And there's lots of thoughts that media was designed that way, designed in a way for and a bit a way for to in many ways condition the working class, the middle class, to be able to not even be able to, but to be less free spirited, be less guided and less empowered and less having to be able to break out and be able to own their sovereignty. And we're seeing maybe a lot of evidence that would suggest that, because one of the things I've noticed, particularly in the UK, I found it quite, I have to be honest, very alarming, is that we're seeing a high rate of a lot of disempowerment in relation to media and information, and as I said, control about what we see and what we don't see. But we also see a huge unfairness, right? And I mean, I wouldn't say it's dishonest, it's, complete manipulation, a lot of things that are really not right going on. But we're seeing so many people sitting back and in many ways just letting it happen, not speaking up. So while half the world have people up saying, no, we're not going to accept this, we're going to change this, we are not putting up this, we do not need to put up with this. I'm seeing a lot more in the UK where people are very passive, where they seem to think it's someone else that's to sort the problem out, and they've gave over their power to someone else and they are not taking their sovereignty back. And I wonder, is it because, first of all, we are in the UK, if we like it or not, we're very much a nanny state, and there's been a lot of self-reliance on certain bodies just to do things so that it makes our life easier. And if you think about all the things that our forefathers fought for their rights and we've maybe had it too easy, I don't know, right? But what I find very strange is the level of corruption that's going on, the level of insanity in many ways, but people are certain what would appear to be a state of apathy, disempowerment, extreme stress, extreme overwhelmment, or even where when it's apathy, in many ways, the person just shuts off. They pretend that there's nothing going on because it's almost like in some level, they think it's so big that they don't have the capability to participate in change, or they think that it's so big that there's nothing can be done. Now, in many ways, that's just another form of self-sabotage. It's a state of disempowerment. And it's one big reason why, in many ways, we should be unplugging more. Also, unplugging more from the media and television that is from our local regions or our local countries or continents, right? Because the reality is we're only being fed one version of that story. And if we look at the UK just particularly, the UK throughout history has been involved in some of the most heinous and horrendous crimes and have lied to their people, lied of what really went on, and get involved in lots of things which were political or financial. And now people are starting to switch on to what's been going on. There's been a lot of a bigger agenda going on, right? And the reason why is because most of us, we would never, first of all, we would never believe that we could do some of the things that these people would do, or we don't think that, but also because we've become passive. We have became in very much and in a way you could call it enslaved in the mind by media. We have got so used to a box telling us what's the truth, a box telling us what's the news, a box showing us certain types of characters who are supposed to be the truth tellers, characters and imagery and a story. We're so used to that. And in many ways, if you look at the older generation have found it really hard. I'm not going to say there's one TV channel where more and more people, they need to get rid of their TV license because of a certain TV channel. But the older generation, even though would say that's no, there's something not right here, and they would challenge it, they're still hanging on to watching this particular TV channel because guess what? It's been in their living room, it's been in their homes for so long, it's like part of the family, right? And when I go back to archetypes, that's why a certain role that is in a TV series, right? People have made up a certain belief about that person. They think that that person is a certain person because that's how they're portrayed on the television. And that gives a sense of security because archetypes, so if you see someone in a series that's been going 20, 30 years and there's one of the characters that you've known from quite young and they're now whatever, a mother and a grandmother. And because of the way that cleverly that TV has portrayed that image, you believe that this person is trustworthy or whatever, or not trustworthy, whatever, the characters come across like. But excuse me, apologies, but we are in those situations cutting ourselves, even if it's TV. We're cutting ourselves off from our own intuition, our own discernment, and we are allowing ourselves to be programmed. And that's what happened in certain wars. That's what happens in certain countries where people are programmed and to believe that this country's bad, this country's good, this leader's evil, this leader's amazing or whatever, right? Um, but the reality is lots of things are never as straightforward, just like human beings. Like you may see me here, for example, and you may see me looking reasonably healthy. I have, I'm doing lots better, but I do have some rare medical challenges. And for example, if you saw me even say 3, 4 years back when I went to a dentist, you probably wouldn't recognize me from the person that appears calm, relaxed, in control of her body, to what happened when I would be exposed to vibration. My muscle weakness would just go, the body would, the cheeks and and to do with the pain in my ear, my cheeks would vibrate, my body could go out of control. Now, that there you are seeing two different snippets from my life. Now, I know when I would go to the dentist or whatever, people would look at me because they're only seeing that one small part and think, oh my God, that woman's very disabled, and look at how well, and look at she's got no control of her body. Now, some of them might believe that that persona would be the persona that I would have to in house, but it would only be in those situations when exposed to different pitches, different vibration, and even it can be flooring, certain floorings to do with the muscle weakness, right? Now, to them seeing me, so someone seeing me online and think, oh my goodness, Eileen runs that business and she'll run that business. Oh my goodness, she's very, they might have this projection of, oh, she's so successful and she must be this. People make lots of assumptions by certain things that they see. And that's again because we're programmed. It's like sometimes someone sees someone in a fancy car and they assume because they've got a fancy car and an expensive car, they've got a lot of money. But that may not be the truth. I mean, my father was a self-made man. He was someone that had been at 15, couldn't get a job and went into the mines, and then a few years later he started get himself sorted out to try and improve his life, and eventually would open his own and create his own manufacturing business from, for the smallest way up to a big manufacturing company. And as he said, there's lots of things that, he was never fooled that way. He could, just because someone would appear as if they had money, never, sometimes the people that have money do not appear as if they have money. But in society, people tend to generalize, and it's also to do with archetypes, because we associate certain imagery and certain things. So when we associate certain things and we believe certain people, right? And we're watching lots of TV series, we're watching lots of films, watching news, which is so fear-based. This is all information and all triggers stories, trigger emotions. And we've seen over the last 3 years so much media that is based on fear, terror, pushing certain agendas, getting us to believe that such and such is a goodie, such and such is a baddie, but they do not tell you in context. I've been shocked about how many people have listened to certain things but have no understanding of certain history of certain things, right? And because the agenda at the moment is they only want to tell you certain snippets of information so that you side with one side, right? There seems to be a lack of journalism. Now, when people are pushed into constant fear and also when we're conditioned to not be allowed to critically think, when we're not allowed to question things, when we're not allowed to see a bigger picture of all the reasons why certain things happen, we become brainwashed, we become conditioned, we become complacent, and we become lazy. The mind becomes lazy because we're only forming our information from what we're told or what we saw. We're not using our intuition, and we're not using our ability to critically think. So too much media, too much television, too much information is generally stressful, right? Is generally very stimulating from the brain because it's not natural. In a normal day life, we wouldn't be exposed to that amount of information and that amount of someone's opinions, and often one-sided opinions in political, government, or whatever. So you've got that. But you also, when you're watching a box, you're focused on that box. Even if you're lying, half sleeping, you're distracted, but you're kind of still, so on an unconscious level, you are being filled in with one objective. Now, there's been quite a lot of screenshots went about. It's not been on mainstream, it's not been allowed in mainstream media because it would tell a different story. I'm going to give you some examples of things without me trying. I have to watch because I could get censored by this. But there's been a lot of footage went out over the last years of where a journalist, for example, from a certain country, some of them from Britain, but some from other countries, where have been trying to say they, for example, have been taking a certain footage of certain situations to project, for them to get the whole picture and get people to see how bad a war is or how bad a certain virus was. And guess what? Because people have their phones now and have media, have came up and maybe stood back behind the journalist without the journalist knowing, or stood from another angle and showed you the bigger picture. And there was one which was supposed to be a journalist for Al Jazeera. Now, Al Jazeera was supposed to always be more neutral and tell you things that other countries wouldn't. But basically, this journalist had, or it wasn't, I'm saying it's a journalist, could have been Joe Blogs in the street, took another angle, and you had someone lying down, which looked like the journalist was his microphone on the ground, and more or less saying there was bombs, right? And he had set it up to make it look like that. But guess what? There was people when they took the the whoever it was had took the other angle, had got him in, had showed you that actually the corner of him, which you couldn't see with the footage, was someone just sitting having quite a few people in a coffee place having their coffee. So it wasn't quite true, and there was no sound of, say, bombs going on. Then you had other situations. There's so many like this. There was also a situation which looked out. I think it was India, where they had implied that there was black bags with bodies all put out in the back of the hospital, and they had a camera again, and they were filming this. And two people came along, had been watching it with their cameras, and started to kick the bags. Which, first of all, everybody was horrified. There was nothing in the bags, right? Now, that's just an example of how we all can be fooled, right? And we all see, and it's the same if a friend tells us a story and they're only telling their side of the story. And one of my friends' mum always used to say, there's three sides to a story. There's their side, there's the other side, and there's somewhere in the middle. And there is. But the reality is, when we watch certain things and we're not thinking, just like media, just like social media, we're only seeing a certain picture. So when I share certain things on social media, people may, just because of the way the mind works, have made this huge picture about me, but that might not be correct, right? But what's happening is their mind is creating a picture. And many people at the moment they believe everything they see on social media, or they seem to, because they are so overstimulated, they're so exhausted, they're so stressed, they're so, in many ways, open to be programmed. They have lost the ability to be able to discern and to critically think and to recognize that it is only media, and that's only small pockets of her life, that not everything, I'm not a big, even though I do lots of things for my business, I'm not a big person in taking photographs of myself, and that's just, I've never been like that. And also, I've spent a large part of probably about the last 6-8 years being mostly housebound due to some of my challenges, and nothing really exciting. If I had to really share photos of my day, I think people would get really bored and would think I was insane. But the reality is that we've created this, I believe, in a way, social media, and even this is one of the reasons why I've been actually pushing a lot of my business is moving. I've never always relied on social media for my business. I always use other things, but I've been suggesting to people to start using more and more other ways, because media, in many ways, some people are switching on of how unhealthy and how distorted and manipulative it is, but also how much it dumbs the mind down, and how people are so stressed and overwhelmed by so much information, particularly negative or manipulative information, and how it's basically dumbing people down, and particularly young people, from the ability to be able to discern, use their own gut instinct, have the ability to critically think. These are really important skills. But when people become programmed and conditioned to a certain way of thinking, or you know, the it impacts us on all levels. And something that I didn't mean to mention already in this video that I haven't was that when I was 21, I was studying music. It was what you call popular music. It was called a rock music course, but it was more like popular music. And one of the lecturers that was on that course was basically someone who basically had a recording studio where a lot of famous people went to record their records. And one of the things that came out was how much, which was not supposed to happen, was subliminal messages being used on tracks, right? And that got us all understanding and talking about, and looking into a wee bit more about how much subliminal messages went into marketing. And when you study things like, well, if you study things properly, like therapy, NLP, and you go into psychology and psychotherapy, and you look at that one from different elements, you understand how many things in society are programmed in marketing. The colours, why you buy a certain thing in the shop may not be why you think. You may think it's because that's the best product in the shop, but maybe it's because you like the colour and the font and the way it makes you feel in the advert, but you don't even realise that. So why does someone like this brand compared to others? It's not always taste or whatever. It's a lot. There's a lot goes into marketing because it's all psychological manipulation, and it's one of the reasons why I went into the other side of my business to help healers who wanted to do everything from a very more authentic way, as I teach them spiritual marketing, and I teach them how to use archetypes in a very honest way and represent them exactly what their business represents, not just what they want people to think their business is. So media and TV in many ways is so filled with not just information overload, but it's filled with a lot of manipulative information that has a certain agenda. And we see this with even political and certain agendas, even for young people. They're exposed to a lot of things and they don't see it from a wider perspective. But it's because the marketing behind it, the psychological, the celebrities, the influencers that are used, the people are used to sell it, to promote it, have such a power over them that they believe this to be true and this to be right. And these are all examples of how we all can be caught. It's just like if you have a political party you like, and you like a particular leader just because you think that they look kind or they're going to do the job or they're more firm or whatever. If you've always believed that, it's more easier to be programmed by that individual because that's someone you trust. That's how marketing works, right? So what we've got to understand is that marketing and media is a lot of information. It's colours, it's sounds, and it's like you have music sounds, you have words, you have language, you have colours, you have certain psychological tactics, you have personas, you have archetypes that play a story that triggers certain emotions. And most of us would never go through the amount of emotions in one day that we experience while watching television or media, right? And that's unhealthy because it's all stimulating the nervous system. It's all stimulating the mind. And it's all designed to have us living very unnatural lives and unhealthy. And it's probably the biggest, well, one of the biggest reasons why so many people are so intuitive. And, one of the things I suppose a lot of us in the light workers community have looked at is how even people who would have always described themselves, I never really ever described myself as an awakened person, till I started to see um, the things that went on and realised that I was far more awakened than most people around about me. And it opened my eyes because I'd realised how unaware and how so disconnected from people, from their soul and from their intuition people were, and so easily programmed by fear and by stress. So we're in a stage in society that if we want to be empowered, we want to be true sovereign beings, and we want to be live more from a spiritual and soul aligned way, we have to be able to detach yourself from that programming and that conditioning and that manipulation. Okay. If you are someone who is trying to move out of that, one of the things I would say to you is meditation, being still is one of the most powerful ways. Even when you're trying to develop your intuition, I have lots of courses that can help you develop your intuition, but I would always say it's about learning how to meditate, not just about guided meditation, how to meditate, how to be still. And I do have a 5-day free course. Now, it is a bit older, I have to be honest, that's a really old course, but it's packed with really useful information and simplicity. It's all about simplicity. And it's a great for beginners because meditation is something that we can take. Well, it depends on what you're doing. I do teach advanced forms of meditation, particularly in my stress management practitioner training. And it's a way for sometimes to fast track, but it's because it's an advanced technique. I only teach it as a gift to my students in that course. But meditation generally is something that it's not something that you can just do and just get the benefit and then that's it. It's like almost like you've got the results and that's you. It's something that you do on a daily basis and you bring in your life and you incorporate your life. You make it part of your day because the more you make it part of your day, you become more still. You quiet the mind. You have the ability to be more discerning because it's a natural progress. You're making it part of your life. It's not something you just pick up, another time you're feeling stressed. So I hope that's helped. Have a wonderful weekend. If you'd like more information about any of my programs or courses, not just even the stress management, the stress management relaxation training stuff, but my sole purpose work, I work with healers and coaches, get in touch. But bye for now. Have a beautiful weekend. Bye bye.